how likely do you think that we might see another strike on Iran? And the reason I ask is the Israelis have focused specifically on Iran's not just nuclear program now, but also that Iran is reconstituting its missile capabilities. So, uh, so this is the main thing being sold out of Israel now. That is, they have to strike Iran in the coming months in order to reverse all the progress Iran has had in terms of rebuilding its missile stockpile. What do you make of this approach?
Well, there are lots of things that can be said, really. First of all, if you recall, I think it was like in 2015 or so, Trump once said that if I shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, uh, my supporters will, they'll continue to support me. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like that. And that's true. His base, no matter, as I said earlier, even if there's footage of him doing something extremely, you know, something I can't explain here, you know, horrible. I think that there's going to be a percentage of Americans that will stick with him. Doesn't matter what he does. And so Trump can say he stopped 20 wars. It doesn't matter to them. They'll repeat the narrative. But I don't think that they are anywhere near 50%. I don't think they are even 40%. His approval rating right now, from my understanding, is roughly around 40%. There are different numbers, but but the future doesn't seem to look good. So it's only going to make it worse for him. There is, of course, a case to be made that um, Trump could carry out strikes somewhere in order to distract attention away from other issues like the economy, like Epstein. That's something that he could do. Actually, I personally think that the whole Nigeria thing is has more to do with distraction than anything else. To say that while he's a protector of Christians, even though he's killing Christians in the Caribbean. But anyway, um, I I think that ultimately there will be war. I don't know, when or how it will play out or against whom. But the Israeli regime is not an entity that can live in peace. And as long as we have ethno supremacism, as long as there are being Palestinians killed every day and Lebanese being murdered every day, this can't. There's not going to be stability. And the Israeli government is not strong. It's not a powerful entity. The very fact that he has to go to Washington shows that it is it is a needy regime. Without full U.S. support, they really can't do much. And on the one hand, Western media and Western think tanks and leaders and uh, surrounding Netanyahu and others, they speak about Israel being a regional superpower, but a regional superpower doesn't have to have its leader constantly go to Washington to convince Washington to do something for it. So when we look at this, we have to keep in mind that public opinion in the West is turning against Zionism. The West is increasingly facing calls, the the political West, from ordinary people to take care of our country instead of carrying out wars abroad. It's going to be increasingly difficult for Netanyahu or anyone who's in power in Tel Aviv to be able to behave or push the United States to do things in future that they've been doing in the past. I think the world is changing. And I think the war in Ukraine is actually important for our region. A Russian victory over Ukraine, regardless of what some people think about the nature of the war and who's right and who's wrong, but a Russian victory is not going to be good for Israel. A Russian victory is going to be good for Iran because it weakens the West. And it's going to, I think, be terrible news for the EU and terrible news for NATO. And it's not going to be good news for the United States, regardless of whether Trump tries to pretend that he has nothing to do with it. It's going to be horrific news for the political elites in the United States for many reasons. But so I don't think that the time is on the side of Netanyahu. But that, of course, could also be an incentive to do something now. But striking Iran is going to be very costly. Also, Iran's missile capabilities, Glenn, are spread all over the country. They're all deep underground. The Israelis were not able to damage a single missile that was underground. They hit a few missiles on their launchers, and they've been able to damage like the gates or the entry points, a couple of the underground sites. But they were never capable of doing any significant damage to any part of the missile program. And now the Iranians, from my understanding, they're building new underground bases. They are redesigning their current bases so that they'd have more ways to come out, and they're also have much greater drone protection. And it's going, and then and I don't know this from any official sources or any insider. I don't have any insider information, but my understanding is that the Iranians are increasing the number of missiles that have a longer range, and that they're developing more bases to the east of the country. So that means the Iranians will be lobbing more missiles from the east, making it much more difficult for the Israeli regime to deal with them, because they'd have to go all the way over and cross Iran instead of firing from Syria or firing from Iraq. They'll have to come deep into Iran to strike them, and that makes them much more vulnerable. The same is true with the United States if the United States enters. And then there's another issue. If the United States wants to have a fight with Iran, if it wants to have a war, it's going to be like last time around. Last time, the Americans only got involved in striking 3 places. And then they went and said, we're finished. And they said, as Trump said, we have obliterated the nuclear program, which obviously that's not what the head of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency believed, and that's why he was removed subsequently. But that aside, the number of Iranian underground missile bases are huge. It's like they're enormous. There are maybe hundreds. So the U.S. is going to have a long air campaign against Iran, and that will make all U.S. bases in the region and those countries that host them really in trouble. The Americans struck three targets, dropped a few bombs. I don't know, 14. I don't remember the exact number. And then Iran struck back and destroyed key parts of their base in Qatar. 6 of the missiles struck, and we later on, even though they denied it at first, but later on it came out that they were severely damaged. Well, if the Americans are that was just like one single strike. But if the Americans are going to wage war against Iran, then that would be more. And that's where the Iranians will have to deal with Americans across the Persian Gulf, and those regimes that host U.S. bases, there will be going on. But the underground bases that the Iranians use against the Israeli regime, the missiles that they use against the Israeli regime, these are a very small part of Iran's arsenal. The real focus, the real strength of Iran is the underground bases and which hold drones and medium and short-range missiles, which are directed at the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean. Because Iran is not, the threat of the Israeli regime, of course, with the full support of the West on its own, it's not much of a threat, is one thing. But the threat of the United States has always been the top priority for Iran. And ever since, especially the invasion of Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq, the Iranians have been preparing themselves for war. Even before then, these underground bases that the Iranians build, on the whole, are not for the Israeli regime. They're for the United States. So if the Americans start attacking, then you will see thousands of drones and thousands of medium and short-range missiles, which reach their target very swiftly, flying not to Palestine, but across the Persian Gulf. and the Indian Ocean and the Strait of Hormuz. And we all know how wide the Persian Gulf is. It's not very wide. And Iran controls half of it. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf. So if there is war with the United States, that is the end of the global economy. If there's war, what the United States did last time around was just a small strike. But if they're going to go after Iran's defense capabilities, then that means a fight for your existence.